Hello, everybody. So good to see you. Now, a lot of customer experience leaders are asked to do a lot. They have to look back on past data and make decisions based on those insights. But one of the things that we talk about, but maybe don't always know what to do with, is forecasting the future, looking ahead to how customer experience and expectations will change, and how we as customer experience leaders can keep up with that. So today we're going to go through a few of the ways you can not only look for the clues for customer experience, but also think about what do you do to stay ahead of what's next. So I'm happy you're here, and I'm happy that you're joining us for another live session of Ask Me Anything from Experience Investigators. We're here every Friday. You can join us either mostly live, sometimes recording, where we answer your questions. We find out from you what content you want us to cover. So make sure that you participate and drop questions in as we go. And we are also interested in where you're joining us from. We are always fascinated to get a global audience. So we hope that you'll tell us where you're joining us from today, as well as what your weekend plans are. People are starting to get out and about a little bit more. People are starting to enjoy summer weather here in North America and other places. So tell us what you're up to. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeannie Walters. I am the CEO and founder of Experience Investigators. And we are always happy to have with us David Hornreich, our Director of Marketing, who is here with us every week. Hi, David.
Hello, hello. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. So we have people joining us and getting settled. But what are your weekend plans, David?
Oh boy, you'd think I would have prepped to an answer for this. Probably a lot of catch up, probably some yard work. It's actually not rainy, so I think some lawn can get mowed without jamming up our poor little lawnmower. Maybe a Costco run too. Pick up some bulk items to last us for way too long.
Yeah. Excellent. We go through a lot of Costco runs, I will
Yeah.
say. I think we're there weekly. Isn't that crazy?
That's impressive.
Yeah. But we eat a lot of spinach and different things like that you can get in bulk there and stay healthy.
The spinach you can't just throw into the pantry and come back to a month later.
No, nothing like that. Nothing like that. Yeah. But that's good. And it's also Father's Day here in the United States. So I hope you will be wishing your father a happy Father's Day as part of it.
Yeah, I guess I should do that too. Maybe I'll take him to Costco to celebrate.
Oh, there you go.
Dads love Costco.
$1.50 hot dog.
That's right.
Well, good. Well, it looks like we have a few people joining us. Excellent.
Yeah. Mindy, you win first prize for the first comment of the day. Tyler, good to see you in rainy Cleveland. Rainy again. That's unfortunate. Jamie joining us from Omaha. Sumia from North Carolina. Siat says hello as well, joining us on YouTube.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we are happy to have you all here. Why don't we go ahead and jump in and talk about the clues?
Let's do it.
All right. So when we talk about what customers want next, what we're really trying to figure out is how to predict human behavior. And human behavior is notoriously difficult to predict. We are not rational creatures. We do not make decisions based on logic often, even though we tell ourselves we do. We are driven by emotions. And we also, want to know what the other people are doing, right? Like keeping up with the Joneses. So we have some amazing technology and tools now with sophisticated modeling and massive data analysis, but a lot of that looks at past behavior. And what we're finding is that humans in general are changing their behavior faster. We are kind of evolving faster as humanity. Part of that is because the technology, the tools, the products, everything else, that's evolving at a faster pace too. So what can your business do to look ahead and predict future customer behavior? That's the question we're really grappling with right now. Because in one study by Concentric, 99% of leaders reported doing some kind of forecasting. So almost 100% of leaders said, yes, of course we forecast, we look to the future. But only 14% of those leaders said that they were effective at doing so. I think that shows the gap that we're constantly dealing with when we look ahead. It's harder than sometimes we give it credit for. And predictions are great if you actually do something with them and then act on them and learn as you go. Learn about what works and what doesn't as you predict and forecast. So I call these customer experience clues because we want to look at how our customers are behaving, as well as the landscape of the marketplace and just economics in general, and all these different things that can have an impact on our customers and their behavior. So first of all, we want to know your customers, know their goals. You also want to know your goals as an organization, as a leader. We want to look for customer experience trends across industries. And then we also want to consider the customer's entire ecosystem. Instead of just thinking about their linear journey, we want to broaden that viewpoint that we have, make sure we're looking at their real lives. So first of all, know your customers, know their goals. This is so important. You probably have a lot of data. You probably have some customer feedback metrics. You probably have ways to really look at your operational metrics to determine how customers have behaved. So you want to look at all of that and make sure that you are applying that to your goal, that you have a shared definition of customer experience in your organization. So you want to make sure that you're starting with those foundations. So find out who your customers are, what their daily lives are like, what they do with your products. You want to consider their real lives. This is something I stress a lot because it's so easy to slip into this idea that customers are only interested in buying our product. So we're going to design everything for that. But that's not how we live as human beings. We are buying a product or participating in a service because we believe it will help us achieve our goal or do something or feel something. So make sure you really understand what's motivating your customer, not just with your product and service, but in their overall real lives. And then we also want to keep in mind, especially right now, what has most recently happened? What are those lives that they've most recently led? We have all lived through some remarkable times in 2020 and into 2021. We have all seen how behavior has changed. We have made different decisions as customers as well. And so we want to make sure that we're really keeping in mind, what are people going through today that will impact their behavior tomorrow? So as you think through how well do we know our customers, I encourage you to think about this in that forward-thinking way. We also want to look for customer experience trends across all industries. It's very easy to put on the blinders and think about just our industry and say, well, we're in B2B and we're remote, and so we don't have to think about certain things. But there are certain trends that will impact pretty much every industry. And one of the ones that I think is going to be with us for a long time is an emphasis on health and safety measures. Customers want to know that they are safe and that action and behaviors have been introduced to keep them safe and keep them healthy. So this means reassurance. How can we reassure customers that, yes, we are caring about their health and safety moving forward? This is true in almost every industry. Think about any time you interact as a customer. What does that look like? How can we reassure our customers that we are considering their health and safety moving forward? So that's just one example of a trend that might be across all industries. Look for different things. Look for what's happening with hospitality, what's happening with manufacturing, and really pay attention to those trends, because often that will give you a clue about how customer expectations are changing. We also want to consider the customer's entire ecosystem. Now, we talk a lot about customer journeys. We talk a lot about journey mapping. I encourage you to think beyond that experience with your customer. So maybe you have a journey map for your customer journey. Think about what would happen along the way that could impact that journey. What is happening at the macro level? What's happening with the supply chain, with economics, with customer expectations, all of those things. Because as we know, customers are shifting their expectations based on what they see in the marketplace. That doesn't necessarily mean just your competitors. That means way beyond that. We also have to respect the phase of life they're in. Are they dealing with little kids? Are they dealing with older parents who they're taking care of? These are real things that a lot of people are dealing with in ways that impact their entire lives, including the journey that they have with your brand. And so make sure that if you are thinking about not just that linear process, you're really expanding the scope of your view to think about who are these people and what is their daily life like? What are the challenges that they have? Can we make things more convenient for them? Can we reassure them more? Can we reduce the effort? All of those things as you look to the future. So now that you know some of the clues, we want to think about how do we act on this, right? So when we are looking at acting on this, there are a couple tools and techniques you can use to figure out what lies ahead, at least to forecast and plan and ideate around some of the ways that you can serve your customers. One is future state customer journey mapping. We talk a lot about current state customer journey mapping, where we actually look at what's happening today. Future state allows us to think beyond that and think about what could happen in the future. We want to fix the pain points of the near future. If we know certain things about customer expectations, what can we change today? What quick wins can we introduce to make sure that we are living up to those expectations? And we want to invite employee feedback for innovation. Your employees know so much. They are on the front lines with your customers. They are hearing things from customers that maybe you haven't heard in the feedback. It's really important to invite employees to feel empowered to propose innovation and ideas. So let's talk about future state customer journey mapping. The way I like to do this is, instead of necessarily thinking totally blue sky, where you think, oh, what would be ideal? Because then you get into things that maybe aren't possible. Think about things like, where will the customer be in 1 year? What kind of experience can we deliver in 1 year or 5 years or 10 years? What are their needs and expectations? How can we live up to those? How can we exceed those? And how can our customer journey support them and adapt to those changing expectations and needs, and really help them in their real lives? Now, some of you might be in B2B and thinking, well, yeah, we're in B2B. That doesn't really apply. It does apply, because even in business, there are humans who are making those decisions, who are purchasing, who are the end users of your products and services. So instead of thinking about your customer as a brand or a company, think about that person that you're serving here. I have seen really remarkable innovation come out of exercises like this, because if you think about things within certain constraints like time, or maybe you think about what would happen if we introduced this product, what would that customer journey look like? You can really start defining ways to get ahead of those customer expectations that otherwise it can be easy to overlook and neglect. So I encourage you to, really use this as a tool as you look ahead. The other thing is, we know that certain things are, have shifted, or there are certain trends that we're seeing. So once we've identified what those things are, then we want to fix or correct or improve parts of the journey to make sure that we are meeting and exceeding those new expectations. You want to think about things like, one of the trends that I've seen is that people are moving out of the city and moving to the country or to suburbs. So what does that mean for your customer journey? Well, maybe that means they have to wait longer for shipment. Maybe they have to drive farther away to get to a store. All of those types of pain points that are new based on how they're behaving, maybe that's something you could address very quickly in shifting some things around in the customer journey. So you want to think about those specifics. You want to think about, what are the challenges? What are the new expectations that people have? And how can we tweak our journey along the way to make sure that we're improving things as we go for the customer? We don't need to blow everything up all the time. We can make small incremental changes that make a big difference to the customer at the end of the day. And we really want to invite employee feedback for innovation. When we ask employees to share their great ideas, great things happen. But we need to give them structure. We need to give them tools. We need to tell them, where do you put this information? How do we prioritize it? Instead of just saying, yeah, bring up an idea if you have it. You want to put some structure around this so that employees know that, number one, you're taking it seriously, and number two, that you're getting it in a format that works. Because if you just have a bunch of ideas written on a whiteboard, that's not as effective as having something that you can prioritize, that you can actually put some structure to. So in this case, I mean, think about your contact center agents and all that they hear from customers. They not only hear about your specific journey and products, they hear about your competitors. They hear about when people say things like, you know what, I've been waiting longer here than I wait at, the DMV. That tells you a lot about how they feel about the wait time. They might start comparing you to different organizations and saying, boy, I should have gone with that competitor of yours because they offer XYZ and you guys aren't offering that. Your employees hear so much from your customers. So if they start hearing those things and knowing that they can turn that into a proactive piece of innovation, that can be very empowering for them as well. And so it becomes this really nice cycle of innovating based on not only what customers are sharing, but what your employees are really interpreting and understanding as, you know what, I'm hearing this more and more. We need to address this as well. So this means keeping your finger on the pulse of change, and it means constantly looking ahead. Now, when we do this, we need our leaders. We need to get leadership buy-in. One of the best ways to do this is tie this back to your customer experience strategy, to your overall vision, goals, everything else, the outcomes that the organization wants everybody to achieve. By innovating, you can start predicting those results as well. You can start saying, you know what, I think if we innovate around this, if we improve this, then this is going to happen in 1 year or 5 years or 10. So really looking beyond your customer's journey with your brand and looking at the entire big picture to help you really look ahead. So these are the clues that we talked about, finding these clues. And I just want to bring up that a couple of years ago, Cisco actually did a report about healthcare providers and healthcare consumers. And they asked them, how many of you would be comfortable with video access versus in-person clinic visits? And 3/4 of the respondents in 2013 said that they were very comfortable with video access and that access to their physician was more important than that face-to-face. And back then, it really got me thinking about what innovation means. Because if we know that this is what customers wanted, but we don't really do anything with it because we didn't have to, that puts us in a position where then we're left kind of flat-footed when things change. So think of how many physicians, how many healthcare providers were left totally shocked that suddenly they had to switch everything to video visits during these times of the pandemic. They were caught unaware, even though this data was out there, even though customers were saying, this is what I want. And so be careful not to dismiss things like that. Be careful not to look at reports or data and think, well, that wouldn't happen here, or our customers don't really want that, because then you could be left really, unprepared for when things do change, because they will change. So as you move forward, know your customers, know your goals, look for those customer experience trends across all the industries. Consider your customers' entire ecosystem, including their real lives, their daily lives, and then act on those clues. Use these tools like future state customer journey mapping, fixing those pain points for the near term, looking at, okay, what do we know about changing customer expectations and how can we address that today? And then invite that employee feedback for innovation. Because if we're not looking around to the future all the time, we will be left unprepared. Inertia is really, really powerful. It's really easy not to look ahead, not to act on these clues, not to even think about it. And we just let things happen by reacting to certain issues. I want you to be proactive. I want you to be that leader who looks ahead, takes some risks, and innovates in ways that will stay ahead of the expectations of your customers, stay ahead of your competition, and really serve your customers in the ways that they want to be served. It's not enough to just say that's the way it's always been done or it's working, so why fix it? We want to look ahead at these clues and make sure we're not neglecting them as we plan for the future of customer experience in our organizations. So at this point, I would love to hear your questions. I would love to hear what you're doing around innovating and looking ahead and all of those good things.
Yeah, and we've got our first question from Johnny. Johnny, good to see you again. Good to have you back. And he says, I believe cross-functional company-wide co-creation is one of the most underutilized concepts through which innovation emerges. How do I start that conversation with my company's leadership to implement some sort of co-creative platform or practice into our culture? And do you have any examples, or do any come to mind, of companies that are successfully doing this?
Great question. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think co-creation and cross-functional leadership is so important whenever we're talking about customer experience, frankly. And I think sometimes we make a bigger deal about this. We want it to be, a summit where we get together and we innovate or we plan something specifically. I think we need to learn to be a little scrappier. We need to learn to say, you know what, let's collaborate on this and figure out what we're doing to move forward. So co-creation can come in a lot of different flavors. And I would encourage you to think about it in ways where it's building coalitions too. So if you have a good relationship with a leader and you can't get those other leaders involved right now, then start there, start co-creating there. A good example of this is, I'm blanking on the name. They're a server company, but it'll come to me. They're based in San Antonio. Anyway, they have specific places in their headquarters where they encourage people to innovate and co-collaborate. And they have the 2 pizza rule, which is, only enough people who can eat 2 pizzas. So it keeps it a little more scoped down by design. But from that, they then take all those ideas and they prioritize them and they work together at that higher level cross-functional leadership team who helps them prioritize and then put an action plan into place. And I can't believe I'm blanking on their name. It'll come to me at some point.
I think this is a great opportunity for everyone in the chat and the comments to just chime in with their best guesses, and maybe one of us will get there.
Yeah, exactly.
As the flood of every tech company in San Antonio comes in.
Yeah.
Want to highlight a comment from Pranav, who says, yes, co-creating with customers is the best way to create products and services optimized for best use. Absolutely.
And actually, I'll touch on that a little bit because I've used this example before, but I think it's such a good example. Comcast has a special area in their headquarters where they bring in customers with disabilities to use their remotes and different things like that to make sure that they are innovating around the right way. So they are co-creating with that segment of their population all the time, which I think is something that more companies should embrace, because a lot of tools, a lot of products, a lot of design does not consider customers with disabilities. And so the fact that they take the time to do that, they have a dedicated team, they invite customers constantly to help them improve their products. I think that's a great example of co-creation.
I love that. I've got a question from Jamie here. And before I get to the question, I just want to highlight that Jamie, I didn't address this earlier, Jamie is going mini golfing for Father's Day this weekend, which I am just... It's been too long since I've mini golfed.
Yeah, me too. I hope there's what's a good mini golf hole? Like a windmill or, an alligator mouth.
Yeah.
Or a castle. Yeah. So Jamie, you'll have to report back and let us know your favorite hole next.
Yeah, we need to be able to vicariously experience this. With all that said, Jamie's also got a question. How do you recommend fact-finding for a future state journey map in terms of future wants, needs, goals, motivations? I love this question. It feels like it's a bit more straightforward to craft a short-term future state based on the bright spots and pain points in current journey maps. So how do we look ahead further?
Great question. So I kind of categorize future state customer journey maps in 2 different ways. There is the short term where you're looking at what can we improve today? Where are those pain points? How would we develop that? All of those things. Then there's the innovation side where you can throw out the script. You can throw out the data in a way. You can say, you know what would it look like if we had, if we could create the ideal customer journey here? What would it look like if we could get better response rates? What would it look like if we could get faster turnaround for product development. So, really thinking through it that way instead of necessarily leaning into the past data like we would for that shorter term journey map. So, that's how I think about it. But again, I find that we have more success if we put some realistic limitations on that. And that's why I like thinking about a year, 5 years, things like that, or thinking about we want to introduce a new product. What does that journey map look like? And that way you can really start thinking through the customer's perspective, all those different phases, look for the gaps between your processes that you're designing and what the customer needs. But that's a good way to do it. As far as fact finding and data and all those things, observational work is really great here. I really lean into that qualitative side of things sometimes for future state, because even, and I know like if I have any market research statistician people, they'll let me know. But I really think that sometimes anecdotal data is a good place to start, because if you know enough to start saying, you know what, that health and safety thing, we do need to do more around that. Maybe you don't have data with customers telling you that, but you're seeing that as a trend. You're seeing that as something that's going to be important for a long time. So how can you introduce touch points that reassure the customer, that showcase, your care about their health and safety? That's the type of thing to think about when you're looking ahead. And sometimes that means that we don't have a lot of, very specific data to go on, but we're looking at that bigger picture of the trends, and we're trying to understand what's happening in general and how does that apply to our future customer journey.
Yeah. One of the things that you've touched on in the past is just kind of how if we take the time to collect data, by the time that we can actually use that, sometimes things have changed and things have shifted, especially when we look at the last year or two.
Yep.
And so even if it means not waiting until you have this giant sample size of data to begin working on the trends that you're seeing, that can at least let you get ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think you've heard me say this before too, but we don't need a survey to tell us when we know something's wrong.
Yep.
And so sometimes we rely on data for things we already know.
Yep.
And if we know, then it's okay to move forward.
Love that. We've got a question from Thais, who is joining us on YouTube. At the beginning of this session, you may have heard me say Siat. That's just Thais spelling her name backwards. Very, very clever. She's joining us on YouTube today and asks, how would you go about the senior audience, as COVID was and has been really hard on them? I wanted any feedback you may think is helpful. I have mapped the seniors' journey already.
Okay, awesome. That's really good. They did have it hard, but at the same time, that specific group of baby boomers and older were also the biggest group to adopt new behaviors around the digital experience. So many of them who had not been comfortable with digital options like ordering online or mobile apps even, they started using those tools because they had to. And many of them have become very comfortable with it. So while it has been very difficult for many segments within that segment, we also have to remember that there has been some progress that maybe we didn't expect with that behavior as well. So I would look at what are they doing with your journey? How are they interacting with the journey? Are they going back to in-person things, or are they still wanting that hybrid model? I mean, I know somebody, she's 88 years old. She's very, very active, but she started getting her groceries delivered and was like, oh my gosh, where has this been all my life? And she just loves it now. And I think that's going to be behavior that we see too. Some of those conveniences that they didn't take advantage of before because they had just always done it a certain way, they're going to embrace more conveniences moving forward. I would also say health and safety issues, super important. We need to make sure that we're providing that reassurance moving forward with them as well. So my hope is that as we come out of this pandemic and as things get better, hopefully around the world, then, this group might really surprise us with some of the the changes in behavior and the ways that they've evolved. And so I think there is a lot of exciting opportunity there as well. But again, we want to think about things like, how well can we see things on the mobile app? Are there options to increase text size and contrast? Are there audio options where instead of typing, maybe somebody could speak to it? All of those types of accessibility issues certainly impact this segment as well. So I would consider that moving forward as well.
Going back to the topic of co-creating with your customers, Jamie's provided a really great practical example of how she's done it in the past. So she says, we've received customer feedback in online activities prior to a design sprint, then leveraged that feedback in prototype development, and then gotten reactions on the prototype from the same customers in live interviews. That's beautiful.
Yes. Yes. Well said. Thank you, Jamie.
Yes. I want to shift to a question that came in from email this week. When it comes to looking at CX trends across industries, is it better to look at what customers seem to be asking for or what cutting edge companies are already delivering, or some combination of the two?
Yeah, well, there's the famous quote that if Henry Ford had asked customers, they would have asked for a faster horse. Mm-hmm. And I think there's some truth to that. We have to be careful that sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And this is true for everybody, and that's true for customers too. So if we are seeing things that certain cutting edge companies or progressive companies are doing that customers are liking, then they might not ask for it directly, but we can see that that's becoming a shift in expectations. I mean, there's a reason Amazon is often used as an example here, because when they first started, it was kind of unheard of what they were doing, right? Like all of a sudden you could buy almost any product and have it shipped directly to you. And so all those things started ramping up the expectations for other retailers. Recently, Walmart had to change their shipping agreement and make sure that they were shipping things faster. There are all sorts of ways that had an impact on it. And that's what you should really look for across industries, is what are those types of expectations that could bridge over into the industry that you're in, and how would you be able to show up for your customers in that way? Because if we just rely on feedback and what they're telling us, then we're going to miss those opportunities. The other thing is we often will neglect customers, and they don't tell us that because they just feel neglected and they drift away. And so we have to be really aware of where those moments of neglect are and look for ways to increase the positive interaction points around neglect as well. And a great way to do that is to look around at other industries and figure out, what do they do during this phase where maybe not a lot is going on in the customer journey? How can they, how can we provide that moment of delight? How can we surprise them or exceed their expectations when maybe there isn't a specific touch point for a while? So thinking like that can often help us see beyond our industry and really understand how those expectations are changing.
I think that's a lovely note to close on. I want to remind everybody that we've got free CX resources available at yearofcx.com. And we are continuing to add to that library as well. So you can sign up there to get everything that we've already put out and everything that we're putting out for the rest of the next few months, leading up to CX Day 2021. Otherwise, Jeannie, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here with us. You can find us at experienceinvestigators.com. I'm on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn, all of these places, Instagram, if you want some pictures of my dog, because he's kind of the star of the show there. But if you have questions or if you need more resources, please check out our site. Check out experienceinvestigators.com/resources. Or like David said, sign up for that Year of CX, because that's really where we are delivering different tools and things that we think are going to, help you progress through your own customer experience journey. And that's all free to sign up. So I encourage you to do that. We love your questions. We love hearing from you. We love hearing about suggested topics. Many of these webinars that we do are because we are hearing from you about the content and the topics you want us to cover. So feel free to let us know that in the comments, or go ahead and shoot us an email. Let us know what you think. And as always, I'm so grateful you're here, because the mission of our company and my personal mission is to create fewer ruined days for customers. And we do that because I think it makes a better world for all of us. If we can improve the customer's journey, if we can reduce the ways that we ruin their days, then they take that energy out into the world and do great things. So the fact that you're here with me learning, the fact that you're dedicated as you are to your customers, you're helping me live that mission. So thank you so much for being here. We're here week after week. We can't wait to see you next time. Thanks, everybody.